But this is BBC News, and we are continuing to get reaction and responses and reflections from world leaders right around the world to the death of Pope Francis after the Vatican announced the news that he has died at the age of 88.
The death of Pope Francis on Easter Monday shocked not only the Vatican, but the entire world. Pope Francis wasn't just the head of the Catholic Church. He was a powerful voice for peace, unity, and forgiveness. And perhaps that's what makes the conversation he had with King Charles shortly before his passing all the more significant. Before his death, King Charles said something to Pope Francis that you simply wouldn't believe. So what were his exact words? Join us as we dive into all the details of this powerful and emotional exchange. The weight of King Charles's words. At exactly 7:35 a.m. on April 21st, the world received a piece of news that many had feared was coming. Cardinal Kevin Farrell announced the death of Pope Francis at the age of 88. The news arrived just hours after the Pope had delivered his final Easter message from the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica. People noticed how frail he looked, so much so that aides had to help him sip water and finish his speech. It was clear that his health was quickly slipping away. As the seriousness of his condition became public, people around the world felt the urgency to see him one last time. Among those visitors was none other than King Charles. What happened during that private visit would later be described by those close to it as unexpected and deeply moving. While the Pope lay on his sickbed, King Charles is said to have shared something so heartfelt that it left those in the room silent. According to insiders, the conversation touched not only on personal matters. The subject of forgiveness came up as well. Some believe this may have been about Prince Harry, while others think it might have been something else. Whatever the exact words were,
And that is such a pleasure to see you. Thank you. It's the very least I could do.
I've read the article in Observatory Romano.
it wasn't just polite conversation. It was something sincere. So what exactly did King Charles say? Keep watching to find out. Just days before the Pope passed away, King Charles and Queen Camilla had what is now being described as a very significant and special private meeting with him. Their official state visit to the Vatican had been cancelled due to the Pope's poor health. But the meeting still happened quietly, behind closed doors. The Vatican later released one photo, simple though powerful. It showed the king and queen shaking hands with the ailing Pope. No press, no ceremony, just a moment shared between three people. After the Pope's death, King Charles released a heartfelt statement. In the statement, he didn't speak as a monarch.
King Charles has appeared to briefly lose his patience and scold a guard during the American president's visit. The monarch,
but rather as someone grieving the loss of a spiritual guide and a close friend. The king went on to speak of the Pope's compassion, his dedication to unity, and his concern for justice, both for the people and for the planet. Charles said the Pope's message about caring for creation as a part of one's faith had struck a chord with people across the world. He added that Pope Francis had touched many lives through his actions and beliefs. However, one line in the tribute stood out. The king said that he and Queen Camilla would always remember their meetings with the Pope fondly and were grateful to have seen him earlier in April. He signed the message Charles R. and extended sympathy not only to the Church, but to all those around the world mourning the loss of someone they saw as a faithful servant of Christ. That final meeting, though short, held great meaning. Both the Pope and the King had been dealing with their own health battles. Pope Francis had been struggling with his mobility and overall strength. King Charles, meanwhile, had recently begun treatment for cancer. According to palace sources, they exchanged words of encouragement and good wishes for one another's recovery.
We've received breaking news from Buckingham Palace. Which has announced that the King has been diagnosed with cancer. Let me bring you that statement from Buckingham Palace in full.
With a short caption in Italian, C'è occasione speciale, a special moment. The Post explained that the King and Queen were moved by the Pope's kind words about their 20th wedding anniversary. A spokesperson said the Pope had privately received King Charles and Queen Camilla, offering them congratulations on their anniversary and thanking the King for his message of support during his illness. Behind the scenes, however, it became clear that this meeting wasn't just a formality. But when the Pope personally asked to see the King and Queen, their Majesties were said to be genuinely touched. The official noted how deeply moved they were, especially given their long-standing relationship with Pope Francis and their hopes for his recovery. Adding to the emotional weight of the visit was the fact that the Pope had specifically wanted to wish them a happy anniversary in person. With the official state visit called off due to the Pope's health, this moment between them held even more meaning. According to insiders, both the King and Queen left the meeting feeling that it had been a truly special and personal exchange. Exactly 20 years earlier, Charles and Camilla's wedding plans had to be abruptly changed just 4 days before the ceremony after the death of Pope John Paul II. Charles, then the Prince of Wales, postponed the wedding and traveled to Rome to represent Queen Elizabeth II at the Pope's funeral. It was a moment of public duty overtaking private plans. Charles stood among over 100 world leaders and, in a rather unexpected moment, even shook hands with Zimbabwean President Robert Mugabe, something that drew plenty of headlines at the time. The delay also affected the logistics of the royal wedding itself. The Archbishop of Canterbury at the time, Dr. Rowan Williams, was scheduled to conduct the couple's blessing at St. George's Chapel, but chose instead to attend the funeral. As a result, Charles and Camilla's civil wedding had to be squeezed into the schedule ahead of 3 other weddings booked that day at Windsor Guildhall. Fast forward to 2024, and the visit to Pope Francis marked the King's first as monarch and as the head of the Church of England. While they had met twice before when Charles was still Prince of Wales, this time was different. It carried more weight, more history, especially as both men had recently faced serious health issues. Their connection wasn't simply ceremonial. After Queen Elizabeth II passed away in 2022, Pope Francis sent a gripping message to King Charles. In it, he honored her life of service, her sense of duty, and her unwavering faith. It was a sincere gesture that showed the mutual respect between the two leaders. But that bond didn't just start now. In fact, it dates as far back as 2014. In 2014, Queen Elizabeth met Pope Francis in person at the Vatican. During that visit, he gifted her a lapis lazuli orb with a silver cross. This symbolized St. Edward the Confessor, one of England's earliest canonized kings. In return, the Queen gave the Pope a hamper filled with goods from royal estates, including honey from Buckingham Palace and whiskey from Balmoral. Charles and Pope Francis, however, first met in 2017 at the tail end of a European tour. Charles, still a prince at the time, and Camilla were received for a private audience at the Vatican. Charles responded simply but sincerely, "I'll do my best." Like his mother, Charles also brought a generous hamper filled with food from his Highgrove estate, intended for the poor and homeless. Alongside that, he included framed photographs of himself and Camilla. In return, the Pope gave Charles a bronze olive branch, a symbol of peace, along with several of his writings, including ones on climate change, all of which were bound in red leather. The tone of the meeting reflected Pope Francis's well-known simplicity and humility. Unlike the formal traditions often seen in such encounters, this one felt more relaxed. On the other hand, when Camilla and Charles were visiting Pope Francis in 2017, Camilla didn't wear the traditional black or a lace mantilla, as she had when meeting Pope Benedict XVI in 2009.
Visit at the Vatican today. King Charles and Queen Camilla paid a private visit to Pope Francis. Both went to see the Pope during their state visit to Italy. The Vatican releasing a statement that the Pope wished King Charles a speedy recovery of his health. King Charles was recently hospitalized after having side effects from cancer treatment. The 88-year-old pontiff spent 5 weeks in the hospital with double pneumonia.
By April of this year, the mood had shifted. When the King and Queen visited the Pope once more, both were dressed in black. This time, it wasn't just tradition. It was a sign of respect, as the Pope's health had taken a serious turn. In 2019, the Pope's and King Charles' paths crossed again. In 2019, Charles had traveled alone to the Vatican to meet with Pope Francis ahead of the canonization of Cardinal John Henry Newman. The visit included a grand open-air mass in St. Peter's Square, and once again the two men had a moment. Now, with the Pope's passing, a 9-day mourning period is set to begin. His body will lie in state in St. Peter's Basilica, where mourners will gather to say their goodbyes. The funeral is expected to take place within 4 to 6 days. Following that, Italy is likely to announce its own national mourning. Soon after, within 2 to 3 weeks, the College of Cardinals will begin the process of choosing a new pope. In a closed conclave, inside the Sistine Chapel, they'll vote in secret, up to 4 times each day. Once a candidate secures a 2/3 majority, white smoke will rise from the chapel's chimney, a centuries-old signal that a new pope has been chosen. Following the Pope's death, a lot of people cannot help but wonder if the King himself will be attending the funeral. Will King Charles be attending the burial? Text wrapping, break. King Charles will not be attending the funeral of Pope Francis. Instead, his eldest son and heir to the throne, Prince William, will travel to the Vatican to represent the British royal family. For many watching the transition of royal duties closely, this moment marks a significant step forward for the Prince of Wales. Now, if you're wondering why the King himself won't be there, it's actually not a personal decision. According to royal expert Katie Nicholl, writing in Vanity Fair, the move follows strict tradition. Buckingham Palace confirmed that the King would not attend the funeral, in accordance with protocol and precedents, which historically prevents a reigning monarch from attending funerals. Back in 2005, the then Prince Charles attended the funeral of Pope John Paul II in Queen Elizabeth's place. This time, the torch passes to Prince William. For William, his attendance will be seen as more than just ceremonial. It's being viewed as a major moment in his role as future king. His presence at the Vatican, among leaders from around the world, is expected to reflect both respect for the Pope and the growing responsibility he's assuming on behalf of the Crown. The UK's presence won't stop there. Sir Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, has also confirmed he will attend the funeral. Speaking to the press, he remarked on the overwhelming response following the Pope's passing, and that it showed how deeply Pope Francis was respected, not just by Catholics, but by many around the globe, including himself. The international guest list continues to grow, and one of the earliest confirmations came from across the Atlantic. U.S. President Donald Trump announced that he and First Lady Melania Trump would be attending the funeral. In a post shared on his Truth Social platform, he wrote, "Melania and I will be going to the funeral of Pope Francis in Rome. We look forward to being there." The Pope and Mr. Trump did not always see eye to eye, especially during Trump's presidency, when Pope Francis openly criticized his stance on immigration. Earlier this year, he even called the former president's immigration policies a disgrace, arguing that they unfairly targeted vulnerable migrants. Also expected to attend is Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, who had met with Pope Francis on 3 separate occasions. A source from his office said he plans to be present in Rome for the ceremony. In his own tribute, Mr. Zelensky said Ukraine was mourning the loss of a man who had prayed often for peace in their war-torn country. From France, President Emmanuel Macron confirmed that he too will attend. Speaking to reporters, he praised the Pope's ability to connect with those most in need. But that's not all. Another notable figure making the journey to Rome is Javier Milei, the president of Argentina, Pope Francis's homeland. Though the two have had a rocky past, with Milei once calling Francis an imbecile and the representative of evil on earth, he struck a more respectful tone in his tribute. Despite differences that seem minor today, Milei wrote, having been able to know him in his goodness and wisdom was a true honor. Brazil's President Lula da Silva and First Lady Janja. Lula da Silva have also confirmed their attendance. Brazil has declared a 7-day period of national mourning. In his statement, President Lula described the Pope as a global symbol of compassion. Humanity is today losing a voice of respect and welcome for others, he said. Pope Francis lived and shared every day the love, tolerance, and solidarity that lie at the heart of Christian teachings. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen will also be there. She paid tribute to Pope Francis by calling him an inspiration far beyond the Catholic Church and praised his humility and care for those less fortunate. EU Council President Antonio Costa and Parliament President Roberta Metsola are also expected to attend, highlighting the Pope's wide-reaching influence on the European stage. But not everyone is attending. The Kremlin has confirmed that Russian President Vladimir Putin will not travel to Rome. Still, Putin did send a formal message of condolence to Cardinal Kevin Farrell, now serving as the interim head of the Catholic Church. He noted the Pope's efforts to foster dialogue between the Russian Orthodox and Roman Catholic churches and expressed appreciation for the Vatican's cooperation with Russia during Francis's papacy. Now to the question on everyone's mind. Who will be the new Pope? Though no one knows yet who the next Pope will be, there are already a few strong candidates being talked about, with the death of Pope Francis on Easter Monday, just one day after he gave his final blessing to the crowds in St. Peter's Square. The process of choosing his successor has now begun. One of the first things that happens is the breaking of the Pope's ring, known as the Fisherman's Ring. This marks the official end of his time as Pope. After that comes the funeral, followed by a very private and important event, the papal conclave. Inside the Sistine Chapel, surrounded by famous paintings by Michelangelo, 137 cardinals under the age of 80 will gather to vote on who will become the next leader of the Catholic Church. This election takes place in secret, with the cardinals voting several times a day until one man receives enough support to become the next pope. Even though it looks like the voting only begins after a pope dies, discussions and thoughts about who might be chosen often start much earlier, especially when a pope is very ill. In fact, Pope Francis once said in 2021 that some people were already preparing the conclave while he was still alive after he spent 10 days in the hospital for surgery. Choosing a new pope is never easy to predict. When Pope Francis was elected, many people didn't expect it. He later shared that he didn't even want to be pope. Still, there are some names that are being mentioned as possible choices this time. One of the top names is Pietro Parolin, who is 70 years old. He is Italian and works as the Vatican's Secretary of State, which means he is one of the most powerful people in the Church. He has helped the Church deal with many difficult situations around the world and was very close to Pope Francis. His calm personality and strong leadership make him a strong choice. Another possible candidate is José Tolentino de Mendonça, who is 59 and from Portugal. He is in charge of culture and education at the Vatican. He is also a writer and has published books of poems and spiritual reflections. Earlier this year, he even stepped in for Pope Francis at an important event for artists. Peter Erdo, a 72-year-old Hungarian cardinal, is also on the list. He was talked about as a possible pope during the last conclave. He has led large groups of bishops in Europe and is known for his traditional views and experience in church leadership. Cristobal López Romero, also 72, comes from Spain but works in Morocco. He spent many years helping people in Latin America and is known for his kindness and work with poor communities. He's a member of a religious group called the Salesians, which focuses on helping young people. Another name that has come up is Pierbattista Pizzaballa, who is 59. He is the Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem and has spent many years dealing with conflicts in the Middle East. He even celebrated Christmas Mass in Gaza during the recent war, showing his deep commitment to the people there. Only cardinals under the age of 80 are allowed to vote in the conclave. Right now, there are 252 cardinals in total, but only 137 can vote. Pope Francis made many of these cardinals. 21 of them were appointed by him in December 2024. Others were chosen by Pope Benedict XVI and Pope John Paul II. One big change Pope Francis made during his time was choosing cardinals from all over the world. He selected cardinals from 72 different countries. For 24 of those countries, it was the first time they had ever had a cardinal. This shows how much Francis wanted the Church to be more global and more connected to people everywhere. As the cardinals prepare to meet and make their decision, the world watches and waits. This next pope will not only lead the Catholic Church, but will also shape its future in a time of change and challenge. Who do you think is the strongest contender for the papacy role? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the following video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.